Alright, class, today we're diving into the world of literature. We'll explore different forms, types, and styles, and I'll explain how each one works. Let's start with the basics, the main forms of literature. So, there are three main forms of literature: drama, prose, and poetry. Each form has unique style and purpose. Drama is a type of literature meant to be performed. Imagine watching a play, like Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. There's dialogue, conflict, and it's meant to be seen, not just read. Actors bring the story to life on stage, and everything we learn comes from what they say and do. Prose, this is literature in its regular, everyday language. It's straightforward, without a strict rhyme or stratagem, like in Harry Potter or in the articles we read online. Prose is used in novels, essays, and articles. Poetry uses language in creative ways, often with stratagem, rhyme, or special structures. Think of a poem like Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. It has a stratagem and structure that give it a particular feel. Poetry tends to be compact but full of meaning and emotion. Prose can be divided into fiction and non-fiction. Fictional prose is about stories made up from imagination. Under fiction, we have biography. This tells the story of a person's life, like Steve Jobs' Walter Isaacson. Here, someone else writes about another person's life. Autobiography, when someone writes their own life story, like the diary of a young girl Willie Anne Frank, it's an autobiography. History, this is about real events from the past, like People's History of the United States, Eli Howard Zinn. It's based on research and facts. Travel guide, imagine you're going to Paris. You grab a travel guide, which tells you all about places to visit, eat, and stay. It's practical and packed with helpful info. Self-instruction manual, ever used an instruction manual for a video game or new gadget? Manuals guide you step by step on how to do something, like assembling a furniture.
Character sketch, this is a brief description of a character's traits or personality. Think of it like a snapshot of someone's personality. Fables are short stories, often with animals as characters, teaching moral lesson.
Next is academic text, textbooks or scholarly articles that go deep into subjects, like science or history, are academic texts. Essay. An essay is a short piece where someone shares their thoughts or argues a point. For instance, a student might write an essay on climate change for a class assignment. Now, non-fiction prose includes fictional elements but can be classified in the following. Novel. A novel is a long fictional story, like To Kill a Mockingbird. It gives room for complex plots and in-depth character development. Short story. Short stories are brief, focusing on one event or idea. Think of The Lottery, Ella Shirley Jackson, a powerful story wrapped up in just a few pages. Now, non-fiction prose includes fictional elements but can be classified in the following. Novel. A novel is a long fictional story, like To Kill a Mockingbird. It gives room for complex plots and in-depth character development. Short story. Short stories are brief, focusing on one event or idea. Think of The Lottery, Ella Shirley Jackson, a powerful story wrapped up in just a few pages.
Novella. A novella is shorter than a novel but longer than a short story, like Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Fairy tales. These are stories involving magic and mythical beings, like Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty. Folktales. These are traditional stories passed down through generations, reflecting cultural beliefs and values, like the tales of Anansi the spider in African folklore. Now, let's move on to poetry and see how it's categorized. There are different types of poetry based on purpose or structure: narrative, dramatic, and lyric. Narrative poetry. This type of poetry tells a story. We have epic. Epics are long poems about heroes and their adventures. Think of the Odyssey, which follows Odysseus' journey home. Ballad. Ballads are shorter narrative poems often set to music. The Ballad of Birmingham by Dudley Randall is a famous one about a tragic historical event. Metrical tale/romance. These tell stories in a structured, rhythmic form. Medieval romances like the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer fit here. Dramatic poetry. Dramatic poetry is meant to be performed and includes dramatic monologue. This is a speech by a character, revealing their thoughts, like My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Soliloquy, famous in Shakespeare's plays, soliloquies let characters speak their inner thoughts alone on stage. Remember Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. Character sketch, this describes a character in poetic form. Dialogue, dialogue poems have conversations between characters, giving insights into both. Lyric poetry, lyric poems express emotions and personal thoughts. Elegy, an elegy mourns the loss of someone, like O Captain. My Captain. By Walt Whitman, written for Abraham Lincoln. Ode, an ode is an admiring poem, like Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats. Sonnet, a 14-line poem with a specific rhyme scheme, often about love. Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, is a great example. Songs are poems intended to be sung, simple lyric. These are short, personal poems expressing a feeling or thought. Finally, let's talk about the kinds of drama. Drama is divided into a few main types. Kinds of drama. Comedy. Comedy is funny and light-hearted, like A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare. It often ends happily and may involve misunderstandings or funny characters. Melodrama. Melodrama has exaggerated characters and emotions. Think of superhero movies where villains are extremely evil and heroes always do the right thing. Tragicomedy, this type blends tragedy and comedy. The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare has both serious and funny moments. Tragedy focuses on a main character's downfall. Macbeth by Shakespeare is a classic example, showing Macbeth's rise and fall due to ambition. Alright, that's a lot of information. Think about how these forms and types of literature show up in what you read and watch. From novels to movies to plays, each form and type has its place. Alright, to wrap up today, we explored the world of literature by looking at its main forms: drama, prose, and poetry. We broke down types of prose like fiction and non-fiction, from novels and short stories to essays and biographies. In poetry, we saw how narrative, dramatic, and lyric poems each serve different purposes. And finally, we discussed the types of drama, like comedy, tragedy, and everything in between. Remember, literature is all about expression, telling stories, sharing ideas, and reflecting our world in different ways. I hope this gives you a good foundation to recognize and appreciate the variety in what you read and watch. Great job, everyone!